Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. What is the ruling on marriage for someone without strong desire in the Shafi'i school? What is the ruling on marriage with someone or for someone without strong desire in the Shafi'i school? This is an important question. We find that in society, culture sometimes mixes in with our religious understanding to the point where the line of religion versus the line of culture becomes somewhat blurred. This is one such instance. Our religion provides us with a way of life that is all-inclusive, that addresses every aspect of our lives. This means that different circumstances of different individuals will have different legal rulings that apply to them. And it is not monolithic across the board. So when it comes to something like marriage, for example, this is not something that the Sharia demands of each and every individual. So the idea that marriage is a sunnah is a somewhat complex statement. Yes, marriage is a sunnah, meaning that the Prophet ﷺ, he got married and he said, "An-nikahu min sunnati," marriage is part of my way of life. But as a religious ruling, like what's the ruling of a particular individual to get married, this differs based on the individual's circumstance. So in the Shafi'i school, there's some interesting facts that we can learn about this. So let us look at some of these points, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, of the Shafi'i school of thought. So on the screen, you see that there are 4 different rulings when it comes to the Shafi'i school. There's recommended not to, there's offensive, and then there's recommended or offensive. So let's see. A man who needs to marry, so I'm reading here under recommended. A man who needs to marry because of desire for sexual intercourse and has enough money for the bride's marriage payment or mahr, for clothing for the season of the year in which he marries, and the expenditures of one day. So food, drink and shelter for one day. If this applies to you, then the ruling in relation to such an individual is that it is recommended for them to get married. Next category, recommended not to. One who needs to marry but does not have enough to pay for these expenses that we just mentioned is recommended not to marry, but rather to suppress his sexual desire by fasting. And if it is not suppressed by fasting, then he should marry, borrowing the money to pay the bride's marriage payment if she will not accept his owing it to her. So that's a second situation. Now, for whom is it offensive? It is offensive for someone who does not need to marry or who does not need marriage to marry when he does not have enough money to cover the expenses. Marriage is not offensive for a man who has enough money, even when there is something that might prevent him from doing so, such as old age or chronic illness, though it is superior for him to devote himself to worship instead. So that's a very interesting one there. And then finally, recommended or offensive, as for a woman, if she needs to marry, it is recommended for her to do so, though if she does not, meaning she does not feel any sexual desire within herself, and she is engaged in worship or the pursuit of sacred knowledge, then it is offensive for her to do so. It's offensive for her to get married, though such a woman needs a husband or unmarriageable relative to travel and the like. So that's an important breakdown of the different rulings depending on an individual's circumstances. It's not just a matter of, how we pressure people in culture and say, you're getting old now, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? Why haven't you gotten married yet? What's wrong with you? Don't you know marriage is a sunnah and the like? It's not as simple as that. That would be an oversimplification of something. Is it generally recommended to get married? Yes, it's a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, but Islam takes individuals' circumstances into consideration before applying a ruling on that. And this is important for us to understand and consider. And it demonstrates also the importance of seeking sacred knowledge, because what also tends to happen is this cultural expectation and pressure can create a lot of anxiety and can create a lot of anguish among people when they are constantly pressured into doing this thing that they've got no desire for, nor does the Sharia demand of them to do it. And sometimes people do the same for matters that we have no control over. So a married couple, they get married, and then a few months later, people start adding pressure. When you're going to start having children? When you're going to start having children? As if the creation of children is up to the couple, alone. I mean, yes, they must make the effort, so to speak, but when it comes to the result, it may be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trialing them with infertility, and our pressure and incessant questioning of them doesn't really help the situation whatsoever, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله